Awesome. Well, thank you, Caitlin, as always. So it's been about 6 months since the team here had our last webinar on the IAM Advantage solution and have honestly started to move some mountains in the market and seen where we, as this combined solution, have been able to not only accelerate the user pillar in terms of zero trust, but also help enable the rest of the pillars. And we can all fight and say whether there's 5 to n number of pillars, depending on which model, which side of government we're on, which agency's flavor. But it's really been quite amazing to watch the ability to bring a solution up online, clean up the data, validate that data, start driving users through true lifecycle management. If people aren't logging in, pulling them off. If people are logging in with a brand new machine, maybe we don't let them into the privilege access system until they've shown us a couple days of trust on those machines, and then enforcing that all the way down and providing easier to use credentials with things like FIDO tokens and YubiKeys, so that we're not stuck running around with a big sled plugged into our mobile devices and enabling people that way. So we really wanted to take today, not only to talk about the user pillar, but really some of the other pillars of zero trust and how identity has been used across all of our organizations and within the IAM Advantage solution to help in the DoD get to the 27 goals, to get to the civilian executive order goals, and how you can take some of the stories back to your own organization to help really climb this mountain that we're all struggling to get through and get towards right, we're never done with zero trust, but get to a more mature state that not only protects our organizations, but also enables them to do more faster. So we're going to kind of run through those pillars today, talk about some of the things we've done and seen. But first, before we get into that, let's just take a quick look at the pillars. So we're going to use the DoD's framework today. Most of the time, these pillars are the same. They might just be stacked in a different way. They might have a little bit of a different name, but it's kind of all the same stuff under the covers. So we'll walk through user, device, right? My mobile device. Sometimes those devices don't have a user in front of them if they're IoT or healthcare information, or they might have many users that use them throughout the day. And those behaviors really change on how we manage them. The applications, the workloads we've seen in the last 6 months within the IETF, the WIMSI, right? The workload identity management group actually get solidified, and a true chair of that to work on those standards and build them out over the next 2-3 years that are quickly becoming a critical part of zero trust, getting all of those things all the way down to the data level that, hey, I might be a US citizen, but because I'm sitting in this country right now, I might not be able to see that information, or some of the other contextual, right? That's got to tier all the way through down to the lowest layer where our data lives, automating that, orchestrating that through the networks, through the environments, all of that context. Right? Hey, I've got this container running in production. It didn't come from our trusted repository. Oh, shoot, where did it come from? And why is it on the network? And who gave them the keys to actually allow us to connect to that and said it's okay to put a secret there, to put a certificate there, to call everything else? And then how do I even look at all of this? And how do I even know that, oh, Brian's coming from a different device in a different location, to tell the data tier and get that visibility, not only for our SOC and NOC analysts, but all of the tools and applications throughout the stacks. So I think a lot of us have seen the 91 plus controls to get to the target activities within DoD through 27. We've got 152 active controls. One of the keys of why we came together and built this solution for the federal government, and now bleeding over to critical infrastructure and a bunch of other industries, but was it's not going to be easy to manage these, especially when you're going and trying to get one vendor or multiple vendors together across the pillars, but even just within the user tiers. And additionally, we all believe that just having identity in the cloud isn't good enough to meet these goals. And we have to have platforms that run closer to the workloads, run closer to where the data resides, and also in some cases have to work offline too. Could you imagine if a Chick-fil-A lost connection at lunch and how long that line would be, right? As silly as that sounds, we're even seeing that type of behavior in the commercial world of, hey, we did rely on the internet too much, and we did rely on, right, a primary connection to that. And then we went and got a Starlink connection because that kept failing. Well, sometimes the Starlink connections get jammed and like we're stuck and we just got cars lining up and it can't take an order, right? That type of stuff is happening every day in our normal worlds. And it just compounds, especially when we're in disaster situations or really conflicts and wars. So with that, we'll just start digging in. Still our understanding of, right, as identity folks on this call trying to enable zero trust across our organizations, right? We've barely got our arms in most cases around the human identities. Now they're asking us to do the device identities and combine those together to build a profile, and then combine that to the applications. And at the same time, make it easier to enable all of these things and integrate all of these things. And oh yeah, the attacker, even though they got in that way, their next pivot was coming right at our identity systems. Right? We're just getting bombarded under the microscope and really not enough resources, time, money, anything to be successful. And then at the same time, a lot of organizations are, right, saying we're agile, but you take a look at a project plan and it sure still looks like a waterfall plan with a big bang at the end going to prod in 12 months, right? Finding more experts inside of the federal government, inside of the contracting organizations, right? All of these things are just adding up to more and more pain points to try and deploy. So we just took, in this case, the big identity management from idmanagement.gov kind of roadmap picture and said, these are the organizations and components that we use to really drive success within the IAM Advantage platform and give the analytics, the visibility, the data synchronization, make these things available across the stacks to be successful. So with that, let's just start jumping into, actually, you know what, I'll add one more to this. So the other benefit is if you are wanting to get this up and running quickly within a federal government organization, and my camera does not want to focus today, which is probably better for the rest of you. But we are already, all of these products, FedRAMP High, authorized, fully authorized with a full ATO, as well as DoD Impact Level 5. The other benefit that we have in this platform, it is private tenant. Where your organization's data resides is shared with nobody else. You have a unique encryption key to you, and there is no striping of database tables. There is no shared upload space between each of our tenants. This is private to you, and that gives you a level of security that I honestly can say I don't think is available anywhere else in the industry with the breadth of identity solutions we have in this one package. And then, right, moreover, on top of that, these pieces are all pre-integrated together. So when you're building up the master user record from your internal sources, right, SailPoint knows here's how to look at Radiant for active users, inactive users, start dates, end dates, drive that through. This is a contractor on a program in a DBA role. Well, that's tied to these servers, which then gives them this privileged access management capability through CyberArk. And if they get read off of that contract, it's going to get picked up from the source in Radiant. SailPoint's going to see that and say, hey, they're no longer on this contract. Pull them out of that safe vault, right, privileged group, and take it away. And then on the ping side, yep, based on them not having that, they can't even get into CyberArk anymore because that was the last vault they had access to. There's no reason they should even get to the front door of CyberArk anymore. Right? So all of those things are built, working together, integrated from day one, that you're not installing, configuring, right? Every time a patch comes out, a new upgrade comes out, spending a 3-month project with 1 or 2 of your people figuring that out, we provide that all done for you. So with that, I will start jumping into the Zero Trust pillars, and I will just pull off the screen share, and we're just going to chat. So if you all have any questions at all, please, please, please scream at us, throw them in a chat. We really want to be here to help you be successful. And if you've got current challenges, yell at us and we'll tell you if we've seen it, if we've never seen it, or probably know somebody who has if we haven't. But I'd be amazed if we hadn't seen it with this cast of characters today. So first up, and let me see if I can end sharing here. All right. Did that kill share or no?
Matt, you weren't sharing before.
Well, that doesn't help. All right,
So
never mind.
continue chatting.
So, all right, so let's just go ahead and James, you want to kind of lead us off about some of the automation and orchestration side that you all at CyberArk have seen over the last 6 months?
Yeah, sure, Matt. Thanks for having us today and looking forward to the discussion. And I see the IAM Advantage technology stack really add to your point about, hey, we're based around this automation and orchestration. And, what does that really mean? Well, oftentimes organizations will automate tasks, and that's normally within one workflow and one application. And then there's also times where you want to orchestrate a workflow that goes across either different applications and often across different places within the organization. So maybe to your point about the infrastructure team giving something workflow to the security operations team, the security operations team going back into infrastructure to tweak something. And again, I think the IAM Advantage stack is a great example of how you can do that within identity access and management and identity governance as well. So, when you're on your zero trust journey itself, it is a journey, right? I mean, it's not a destination. It's not, three things that you put together. It's really, okay, well, what is your architecture? And, we like to think about it as, okay, well, what kind of insight, if you're using automation and orchestration, what kind of insight do you want to get to? And then what actions do you want to take that? And you want to drive your insight to take action in order to reduce risk. Again, to your point about, is this person allowed to look at this? Are they on this contract or that contract? And, how do you go forward? And so a lot of the tasks that we want to automate, again, with IAM Advantage Stack, best practices for the organizations out there, is really you want to identify those dormant users and roles. And then again, whether that's through identity or identity governance, but make sure that you do that. And then have some sort of automated remediation to remove it. Again, to your point about, okay, that person no longer in ping, so therefore doesn't even have to access to CyberArk as a tool. You also try to want to look at and say, okay, well, what identity access management best practices do we have, and where are those violations? Again, so do we have a policy that says, as you come off a contract, that you're not allowed to hit CyberArk or not allowed to hit these other things? So figure out what those are, what decisions you want to make, and automate and orchestrate against that. As you go down, one of the things we really emphasize as we talk to our customers is identify where do you have standing privilege, right? The standing privilege is where a lot of customers are going to get taken, and then the large remediation has to happen if you have that standing privilege, right? So find out where you have standing privilege, and then can you make it through automation and orchestration to just-in-time access, right? That's the place you want to be, is allowing, hey, when this person needs it, then you give it to them, again, normally through some sort of orchestration. The last piece I'll talk about in terms of the insight to action really is about excessive permissions. And again, I think this is where your identity governance folks come into play, is to really understand, not only are there standing permissions there, but are there permissions in the organization in different roles on different individuals, maybe even on different machines that are excessive, more than you need. Again, figuring out how to do that with some sort of automation, normally also through orchestration across a different set of tools. So those are my initial thoughts, and happy to hear what other people want to say around security and orchestration.
Yeah, before I go to our first question, which I think fits right into the automation orchestration, did anyone else have any thoughts or comments on that side of the topic? I'm sure a
Yeah,
lot, but
no, I'll jump here in real quick since James talked about your standard governance processes, right? And that's where this stack lends itself very well, is you can go up or down with as much governance control or dynamic access as you need. But it's very key, as James talked about, having those key indicators, whether they're policies at the governance layer or policies at the runtime layer, of what something do. And when you tie those to your SIM, SOAR, UEBA platforms, you can take action, right? And as we start to look towards AI and some of the other things that we're all embedding in our platforms, understanding risk is a lot easier now. So we can have that automation in that standing access, as James pointed out, and be able to remove it without actually using it or finding out someone did something nefarious with it, right? You don't need to wait. We're doing constant evaluation of attributes, right? At the Radiant level, we're doing constant evaluation at the attribute at the SailPoint level. So when you get to the runtime, that person shouldn't exist. They should have never logged in. They should have never had that entitlement. They should have never got there. So yeah, there's so many different ways to turn this upside down, sideways. That's the benefit of this stack, really.
yeah. So Frank, you said the magic buzzword of AI that, right? I think my dog is going to have an AI collar soon. And I don't know what it's going to do, but it's going to be the best thing I've ever heard of and seen. And it's going to cost way too much money to buy. But one of our questions was, how's AI playing a role in zero trust? And I know we're starting to see a lot of this emerge within the identity space. And I think you alluded to it, the ability for other applications and services like SIMs and CSPMs to be able to call into the identity stack, block things, enable things. Kind of your thoughts on that side?
Yeah. Happy to jump in here. SailPoint's doing a lot with AI and machine learning underneath our platform. From the perspective of using, the ability to look at peer groups, right? The ability to look at data insights, the ability for access modeling. All of these things, when we think about the complex access policies, an AWS access profile policy, right? That's not human readable, right? But to be able to ingest that into your identity ecosystem and use AI and to understand separation of duties problems or outliers, to be able to do that peer group analysis. And then if you think about things like search, right? Being able to use, natural search in AI with AI. We're adding some of that to our platform. Being able to use AI, we're using it for risk in our SaaS model, in the future. We're using a lot of these tools, AI to just make things more efficient and more accurate, right? The human's not perfect. We've proved that. We need robots to do our jobs for us. And your joke about the dog collar, Matt, we like to kind of chat on these things. I'm actually looking at e-bikes. I looked at an e-bike that touted AI in its computer. Who'd have thunk, right? I don't know what it does, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy the stuff that's we're using AI for these days.
So
I think James had something to jump in on ITDR as well.
I know James has one on ITDR. So Wade, is it all right if I skip you and you can kind of get into what you guys are doing with AI when you talk about the data pillar? And then James?
Yeah, sure. And I didn't come into that part about, so again, especially around orchestration, the ability for, your identity stack, your IAM stack to send signals to and signals from other places in the network, or especially the security stack itself. So it's very important today that the adversary is not breaking into your networks anymore, right? I mean, it's not 90% almost now over the past 6 months where, a compromised credential was used. Therefore, it's only with identity threat detection and response and other controls where you're going to be able to pick up on this behavior. So the machine learning behavior, to Frank's point about, setting up policies to see which policies are being tripped. I think that there's that piece. And then, CyberArk and I'm sure the rest of the companies here are looking at, well, how do we use AI to help the administrators set up those policies and then modify them based on real network traffic that you'll see in your networks. So those are my points.
So Brian, I left you for last and didn't ask because we're going to move into visibility and analytics now. And well, without data and the visibility of what's going on, we're not going to be able to generate analytics, which means the AI can't do shit either. So I'll let you roll with it.
Well, and I was going to take it into the data side specifically. So I'm going to go even more rogue on you, Matt, for a minute. To answer the question too, so we can talk all day about how AI is being utilized within the user pillar and within the different components across all of our different pieces that make up this platform. But I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what AI is doing to make the work that we're doing in the user pillar that much more effective. And it has nothing to do with necessarily the AI within any of our components, but what is getting enabled through some of the AI in the different pillars. So this is one of the areas within Zero Trust. You look at, I like the 7-pillar model of Zero Trust. I really like the DoD model. When you look at that, in the very center of it is the data pillar. And what I don't like with any the pillar model is that they look like they're separate systems, but they're really not. They're just groupings of different types of elements that you need to do. And as much as possible, it should be cohesive across. So an example within where AI is, I think, transforming what we can do within the capabilities that we bring collectively to the table from the user pillar with stuff that has nothing to do with our technology is what we can start to leverage through AI for data tagging and for metadata, awareness and categorization and cleanup of the actual data itself. That is something that is incredibly labor intensive, massively prone to error, and we can't keep up with it from the volume of data coming in. Well, AI is going to basically, the robots are better than people at this, be able to get more classification. It may not be perfect, but it can give us more general classification than what we were ever able to have before. Now, what happens when we have metadata tagging? We can build granular access control policies to it. We couldn't do that before because we were missing that other element. So that's one of the areas in AI I'm most excited about. Yeah, we've got our own investments in AI technology, but it's the investments outside of my technology that give me benefit that then I can unlock tools that I've already have available towards. So one thing that I would recommend for anyone within their organization, make sure that your teams that are focusing on the different pillars for the Zero Trust are talking with one another, because it may be that two different teams for the two different pillars working together will give you a sum greater than the individual parts.
110%. So with that, we're going to throw up our first polling question so that we can make sure everyone gets their CPEs. So we're talking about the critical role of identity in Zero Trust architecture. Which of the following best describes Zero Trust in relation to identity? Read carefully. There may be some trick questions in here. We don't make things easy, but good thing is you're not graded on what you've gotten right or wrong. So Wade, Brian dug into a little bit of the data. Obviously, Radiant Logic plays a huge part in that, as well as not only collecting, aggregating, but also being able to slice it up and dice it and distribute it and aggregate it. Really, for all of those different systems that are trying to consume it, can you kind of give us some of the stories that you've seen over the last 6 months?
Yeah,
See
definitely.
smart people on here. Got a 97% correct rate. I love it. Thanks, everyone.
Well, the answer is always A, as far as I'm concerned. So I'll go with that every time. So one of the things that I kind of came across or what aligned for me in trying years ago to understand and explain zero trust was that for most people I talked to, zero trust was like that parable of the three blind men and the elephant. Everybody saw it from their own perspective. If you got the leg, you thought it was a tree. If you got the tail, you thought an elephant was a brush. You got the trunk, it was a snake. I talk to network engineers and they go, it's all about microsegmentation and access control at the network edge. Why am I talking about applications and identity? That's not zero trust. And everybody has their own perspective. But I think what we realize here in the IAM Advantage stack really kind of delivers is that this is a unified effort. Everybody has to pull on the rope together. And that there's not one part to this model that you can build and say, I've achieved something. Everything is dependent on everything else. The quality of the data cataloging and tagging goes directly to whether you can do proper authorization. The network segmentation and the ability to do micro and macro level and that capability of controlling traffic on the network slows down or stops people from operating inappropriately, or lets you actually control what server can get access to what resource, because these aren't even human beings that are operating in these scenarios. There's so many non-person entities now that have to be incorporated into this model. And I think what Frank touched on a second ago that really makes this complex and complicated, and where AI kind of saves the day, or we're all working that direction, is that it has to be human readable, but it's no longer human readable. There's too much information here. There's too many relationships. There's too much context. There's too much dependency. One person or one team can't manage this information all on their own. They have to build policies. They have to evaluate those policies. They have to make sure the data is constantly being cleaned. As changes are made, changes are evaluated, they're authorized and deauthorized. This is an ongoing, I mean, we called it a journey a couple of years ago. I think we didn't even understand then how much of a daily journey this is. This is an engagement you have to be at and working at. And you bring along your best tool. And I believe AI and machine learning is the future of this zero trust architecture, because the need to be able to look at peer groups and to be able to look at anomalies and to be able to find the needle in the haystack fast enough to stop the bad operator from getting an advantage is critical. And that only really happens when you incorporated everything and then you apply enough policies and procedure and machine learning on top of that to really gain the advantage. And that's what zero trust is about, is regaining the advantage in your network. You have to build this out across all these pillars to make this work.
And Wade, I'm gonna throw in optimism for a second too, right? Because I think everything that you said is really important about taking back that advantage. However, it doesn't just have to be reactive. This can be proactive and beneficial. So when you do this correctly and you understand the anomalous behavior that's going on, anomalous behavior means different from the norm. It doesn't always mean bad. If I'm bringing in a new group or a new user group, onboarding a new partner, bringing in new technology, guess what? That's anomalous behavior against that historic baseline. But that's a good thing, because now I can see that what I'm investing in is working. It gives me, a much greater validation that this next component, because your systems are never static, or at least they shouldn't be. It should always be dynamic and always be growing. It now gives us the visibility. Let's talk about visibility analytics. See, Matt, I did bring it back to the pillar you wanted me to talk about. It gives us that validation of the system performing as intended. So there is value that you can bring in that has nothing to do with necessarily the adversarial side, which is very critical and important, but from a general business operations side in a capacity we simply haven't seen before.
Yeah, Brian.
That's why Brian's a pro. He can bring it right back. Frank, go ahead.
No. I was just to jump kind of on what Brian was saying. The discovery and classification of data, right, is key as well. And I think AI is going to lend its hand there. And when you tie it back to the identity ecosystem, right, we're building that context I was talking about. So you're going to be able to surface, call them entitlements, right? That access to that data, and be able to bring it up into your dashboards and modify those policies. So, I think we're all headed in directions like this. And, it's kind of an exciting time to be in this ecosystem, because where things are going are not where we came from, right? I don't think we're all old and gray here except for Brian. But Matt, you'd be, but we know why. As we, look back, we're going to a place where we haven't been before, and tying this all together with something like AI, it can be scary at times, but really it's necessary. And as we move forward, hey, I'm the governance guy, right? The governance aspect of it, the who, the why, the how still matters, right? And AI is helping with that. And that's why we're leveraging it, right? It helps us tell that story a lot better, for that who has access, why they have access, and should they still have it, right? We still need to answer those questions until the auditors in the sky say you no longer have to answer those, which they haven't done that. We still got to be able to answer those hard questions rather than just be a security concern. It's still a problem all over. So that's all.
Yeah.
I'll hand it back.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're adding to the Uber Ether IAM Advantage platform in this next quarter to help drive really it's the data problem around all of this is we're utilizing the open cybersecurity framework, and my phone will not die. So sorry about that noise in the background. The open cybersecurity framework, which sets the base, there's over 50 companies that have standardized on this as the underlying set of data to drive zero trust analytics. And we've taken that and said, okay, that is that framework. We also have the STIX framework, STIX, that a lot of the SIM vendors and tools use. So your Splunks, your Elastics, your OpenSearches, your ArcSights of the world, your Cribbles of the world are all using those pieces. And then, right, took the same set of baseline data and built views for that, also in Radiant, with the master user, master data records as provided by the CDM program. So we're streaming all of this data, all this attributes in, providing the interfaces that others can stream it in if they've got their own endpoint detection tools or whatever, and then provide it, right, collect it all, but then provide it back out in 3 different formats that tons of tools within the enterprise can read off of. And I think from the data tagging side, which we'll have Wade talk a little bit about there already, but right, kind of get into that, which then gets into network and environment. Right, we've always said you've got to tag your data, you've got to tag your documents, and nobody ever does it. Right? Like I lived in the IC world and had TSSEI blah 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 strings as long as my arm in some of the docs, and it's like I'm not picking all of these check boxes, I'm not picking all of this, but we're at a point with AI today that if we can properly tag 10% of those documents, the tools will start learning the keywords and the needs and be able to be driven from, right, centralized databases that if purple monkey something shows up in a doc, that's automatically tagged this, right? And those, I think, is where AI is going to be great for us. And then using the identity on the outside is when it's tagged this, what is the policy that allows that to be released? So, and that's going to trail up, like I said, through the data to the network, the environments, and then all the way applications and workloads. So Wade, you want to kind of dive into some of the ways that Radiant is helping enable the network and environment side and segmentation?
Yeah, definitely. And before I get into the network segmentation piece, I want to jump off on something you said earlier that I think is critical, and that's data quality and the ability to actually clean up the data. Because in all reality, we've created as an industry a tremendous amount of IT debt. We have a lot of questionable data out there in our infrastructure, in our systems, in to be able to apply AI to data. If it's going to learn, if it learns from garbage, it's going to give you back garbage. And if you're operating your security model on attributes that are incomplete or inaccurate, you're getting incomplete, inaccurate results. So everything that we're building here really relies on getting closer and closer to quality data that you can count on to be accurate. And that's a process also of going back and saying, hey, you know, I don't want to go in my garage. There's too much stuff in there. I don't want to deal with it. But we're going to move to a smaller condo and I'm not going to take it all with me. I got to go in and clean it out. And taking that commitment, but having the tool integration that we have here, the folks that are on this webinar give you the tools to start being able to see what you have. And that's the way you start cleaning things up. You recognize what's in front of you, you put that against what your desired state is, and you start slowly eating the elephant. It's a journey like anything else, but the cleaner your data is, the more you invest on that side, the better you're going to be able to benefit from all the other capabilities in the product sets we're talking about. And when you get down to something like network segmentation, for us, policy engines are decision machines that are trying to give an object access to a resource. And it may be through a network segmentation channel on a switch. It may be an application calling on a database to get data to answer a question. It's some process where an object asks to get access to a resource, and that's evaluated in the moment based on everything you know about that object and that resource. And this is, again, where all the pieces on the table here play. You need to have really tight security around the highly privileged information to make sure you're not inadvertently opening those doors. You got to have SailPoint's ability to actually build and implement policies and lay that out across the organization. You have to have Ping's ability to get very granular about how that authorization is done. You need the data coming from Radiant to feed all those policy engines. So when you're looking at building out zero trust, again, the James mentioned it, it's not individual columns, it's components of a whole. Network segmentation is just another policy engine evaluating a particular set of rules against a requirement. The better the data, the more accurate the rules, the more you refine this, the better results you're going to get across the table.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
the power of quality data, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we saw it very quickly within a large DoD agency pilot last year where, but good 70% was incorrect in some of those columns. And right within the first week, they'd assumed that one column for active was going to be good across the board. And we quickly found out that that was incorrect. And as within 2 weeks, we pulled the data in, we're driving it through SailPoint, showing hey, this person's supposed to be joining, this person is supposed to be leaving. They were comparing against their own programs that they were running, going, why didn't that trigger? Right. And we're able to follow that back upstream where somebody 3 layers up the channel had made a bad coding error and had been there for years because no one was actively looking at that data. They were just having all of these manual exception processes and thousands of tickets being created each month that one coding change, as you followed it back, could fix. So that's right. Yeah. Right. I've joked a long time, all of these AI coding tools, all of the automation there that, hey, that's great. They're building this all off of YouTube videos. They're building this all off of open source, right? Not open source, but just in general, wide open GitHub repositories where 80% of them are college courses with kids who haven't written a thing before. Excellent. Guess what quality of code you're going to get out of that? What quality of analysis? You've got to take and tailor these things, which, right, getting the identity data lined up, getting the access data, the audit data, like makes life so much easier to actually have good models. So I'm going to throw my arms up in the air. I told Caitlin I would do one of these every time we need to ask our questions, but you can throw up the second question, and then we've got so the Uber Ether platform, but it's a unique advantage in the market. What is the key differentiator for government agencies seeking IAM solutions? It was hard to pick just one. There's just so many. But while we're waiting for people to answer that, we've got a question from a guy we all know well, Joe Solinsky. Are there any AI security companies out there, right? Whether it's in the user pillar, device pillar, anyone that we've seen that are worth paying attention to right now. Obviously, all of our own companies are putting AI capabilities and tools in, but and like we'll blow smoke about how great ours are all day long. But is there anyone that you all have partnered with that maybe are outside of the traditional user pillar that you think are doing interesting things?
I'll jump in to say I can't point to anyone in particular. I'm excited to go to Identiverse because last year Identiverse was all passwordless authentication. It's going to be all AI this year. It's going to be booth after booth after booth of people with AI. So I'll walk down the hallways and see if anybody's doing more than slideware. But what I see and this is sort of how I frame AI and where we are right now is that ChatGPT was trained on the internet. It can write my resume. It can pass the bar exam. It knows very little about identity management. It doesn't understand entitlements and peer groups and reporting structures and organizations and application integration. We need to train these tools on the information, the data, the context, the relationships in the world we live in. You curate this thing and tell it that it's an interior designer and it's got lots of experience doing high-end, Art Deco, and it will tell you how to design your home. We need to curate these engines to really understand identity management. And that's a process of both feeding good data into that so it understands relationships, it understands quality, it understands what a privileged account is and why it's important, but also being able to get them making good decisions. Like you said earlier, if we train it on people writing their first program, we're going to get freshman year application development out of it. If we really take the time to educate these engines on what identity management does, and we have a great set of all the different skills needed across all these pillars in this organization, this gives us an opportunity to build something that will really contribute positively going forward to making everything better. So I think that's the piece I'm looking at. It's not, did you get a flashy AI going? But how did you train it? What did you teach it to do? How is it going to give me value other than, rewriting my resume or giving me a flashier email when I need to ask for a raise?
Yeah, I'll just say, like really simple technology that we've integrated into the platform, but we're using some of the libraries from Microblink, and it's something that Ping uses on their commercial cloud offering as well. But really simple as, hey, I'm signing up a new user. I don't want to have them type in their name and password. They literally can just throw up their driver's license and it'll read it and fill out the registration form. It also validates that, right, even completely offline, if you don't have an internet connection, how right is that document? For the state of Colorado, are they using the correct Lotto font with this spacing, with this color? Or if it's a face on there, they will take the highlighted face that is kind of that shadow you get on most of the driver's licenses and say, does that face meet the shadow face, and apply a filter to make it look and do an overlay compare. And then also you're able to, right, this isn't, Microblink will do all that reading for you. They also do CAC and PIV cards, which get interesting in some offline environments, but also some other tools we've actually pulled in from an open source side that says, all right, I've captured your first login, right, with here's what your ID says, but it's been 10 years, but like, I know that ID is good. I know it's in your hand, but this is Matt's bald head. 10 years ago, it didn't look like this, right? I get my driver's license renews this year. So I'm at the furthest end possible. And I do not look like the guy that, yeah. Anyways, thanks, COVID. But be able to take the Matt of today and go, okay, he's at his office in Northern Virginia. That looks different than when he logged in 2 minutes ago, which we know is his office in Michigan. That's not possible, right? Unless we figure it out, and I'm turning off freaking AI, the Mac today, but that's built into the OS now, and you have to do it by app to turn it off. But right, he can't move that fast in 2 minutes if he's in that physical location. Is it a virtual background, right? You can tell on the screen today, Frank's got a blurred one. Everyone else has a one from their companies, except me. This is my true office behind me. And like, it'll tell that those are virtual backgrounds. Those are not virtual backgrounds. The other cool thing we've been able to start doing is also, we've had customer environments where they'll give access to somebody. but they'll just put a camera over their shoulder and stream the screen all day back home from an information sharing perspective. So do they have a phone in their hand? At any point during the day, can blip on the camera and check that. Do they have a webcam over their shoulder? Is it their background? And maybe we're not going to stop it, but we'll raise a flag that says, hey, that's weird. Or if it is a camera, right, we'll shut down that connection, call over to Ping and say, kill the in-browser session. So to us, that's been some of the really cool AI stuff. And it's simple, but so much more effective in proving the context of who you are and where you're at the time. So, all right, we're running out of time and we got way too many pillars left to go. Frank, you want to dig into data a little bit? That was your Bubba for the day.
Yeah, data's data, right? And I think we've hit on it a little bit. It's not a problem that's going to go away. I think I mentioned, data discovery and classification are going to continue to be an issue. I think the ways we're classifying data will change, like you talked about, Matt. At SailPoint, we do have a data access governance tool that does look at the content of data, right? It does that. Cursory look of the metadata. It will look inside of a file, inside of a data element, anything unstructured, and that's key, right? Because then we can have, using AI, we can have, some interesting queries and things that we're using to then build those policies wrapped around it. So I think in the Zero Trust pillar, it's going to continue to be a critical element. I think the tie between data access or data access governance, whatever we want to call it, data security, is going to continue to keep getting tighter with the identity, because it's all about context, right? And it's all about policy. So, it doesn't surprise me that some agencies, when we look outside of, I like to think the intelligence community's got their handle on it, and the Department of Defense, within some of the federal civilian agencies, I think it's still somewhat of a challenge. For all of us here that are identity guys, we're not data guys, right? It's a different conversation, so it makes it hard. I personally have worked around data access security products for quite some time now. And it's not an identity conversation. And I think, as agencies step out and do zero trust, they need to recognize that you need to involve folks from all the different pillars in the conversation. Because not one of us on this call here, we don't fit, with stars or asterisks in all of those boxes. We cover a lot of them, and we enable or support however we decide, or however our marketing people decide to tell us we do. But reality is we don't, right? And that's key. This, like you always hear me say, this is a team sport. And we all need to continue to work together on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Frank. And Caitlin, if we can put up our last question, make sure folks get their CPEs. I'm going to do a quick combination of device and application and workload pillars. So one of the challenges, so question is, panel brings together experts from CyberArk, Ping, Radiant Logic, and SailPoint. How does this collaboration benefit government agencies implementing zero trust? So one of the things we've really seen over the last 6 months, especially with the executive orders, some of the SBOM releases, right, software build materials, and the CI/CD DevOps pipelines to getting software into production securely, right? We've had this world of strong human identity proofing before you can get a PIV, before you can get a CAC. Even when you go in at 15 to get your driver's license for the first time, you got to be standing there with your mom or dad, who maybe 25% looks like you, depending on whose genes came in stronger, right? Your birth certificate, and maybe your kindergarten picture. I don't even know anymore. Sadly, my oldest is 14, which scares me that next year I'm going to be that dad trying to figure out what's going on. But yeah, they grow up too fast. But what does that look like for a software product that you deploy in your organization? Right? Today, a lot of times in government agencies, it's going through this RMF process, going through manual releases, manual validation, and then a manually signed CSR request, and then you get a cert back in an email, and then that manually gets put on the server. Well, that's not great, right? Let's all be honest. That is about the worst way to do it. So we've done a ton of work, whether it's on attesting to devices and are they patched up? Are they secured? Like, if not, or if we haven't seen them get their WSUS update in a month, and we know that they're running a critically vulnerable version of Java, we're not going to let them on the network. Or maybe not into a specific application, because we know that application runs Java Web Start inside of the browser, right? It could be a good old Oracle Discover application from 15 years ago that hasn't been upgraded. And we know that thing is going to get exploited if that thing fires off. So we're going to block until we know your machine's been patched and upgraded, right? And that's done through, right, attributes that come into Radiant, and then, right, sometimes policies that get executed within SailPoint and then enforced within Ping. Or, right, enforce that until you patch that, we're not unlocking that key inside of CyberArk for you to go log into that server, right? We got to make sure that's trusted and patched with no critical vulns before we'll let you into the privilege vault, right? So that side, kind of from device through the user to the applications, but also the application side of running through a pipeline, scanning for CVEs, scanning through a DAST scanner to dynamically determine if that new code has introduced any new vulnerabilities in the browser. I know the Air Force has a policy within Big Bang that if you have more than X number of high critical vulnerabilities, you're not a recommended container. And if you haven't patched those things or acknowledged those criticals and highs in a number of days, they'll put an attribute on you that goes out of compliance, and then leaves it up to the Kubernetes workload to decide, are we going to deploy this or not? But, right, we're building things into the pipeline that says, application came through this, got signed by the right certificate authority, is on the transparency log correctly, put into the container repository we trust. Now we know when that container runs, it came through that, has its level of attestation and verification all the way through, that we can check that the signature on the container about to start up matches what was built at the factory, which might be someone else's company, right? Might be another place in the federal government that you've consumed it from, but you know it hasn't been changed all the way through. And then, since this is the first time deploying into Kube, we're going to dynamically register that with OpenID Connect to Ping Identity, to give it a certificate, to put it online, to allow people to authenticate, but then also as part of that payload of Kubernetes, here's the roles and groups with the workflows attached to them for the requests and approvals that then get deployed into SailPoint dynamically. So we're able to build that entire closed loop infrastructure and, right, add on to it. Here's also the secrets as part of that need to get put into CyberArk to then get deployed. And it's been really extremely powerful. And the other benefit is you're not continually reattesting these workloads in production and having to run through the RMF process. As long as it passes through the factory and matches on the other end, you're not going back and redoing RMF docs every month and rescanning. You're able to actually execute. So with that, we're pretty close to time, but I'll give the team here a chance to kind of scream any last thoughts you've got. So James, we'll start with you, since I think it's been the longest since you talked.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And yeah, I mean, to that last point, really, the scale is tremendous. There's 45 machine identities to every human identity in the organization now, but there's hope, right? So all the things we've talked about allow you to reduce human error, and reduce your risk, and then increase efficiency and productivity. So there is light at the end of the tunnel if you use the tools and you do the proper governance.
Wade?
I'm going to reiterate that I think something you just said a moment ago, and that James alluded to, and I think it's critical at this point, that this is a team sport. I think Frank mentioned that also. you need all the components working together. And I think the fact that you've integrated these together, that you've built security around that you have visibility on an end-to-end basis, solves a tremendous amount of challenges for organizations. If you thought Zero Trust was one product, we tried to dispel that years ago, but it is a family affair. And it is tools that work well together, that are optimized, that integrate and share information freely. And as a whole, you get a solution that starts to deliver on the requirements that you have to meet by 2027. So I think this is a massive step forward in making this possible. I wouldn't wish on anyone starting alone in a room trying to figure out how to do this all by themselves. Definitely enlist all the experience that's on this webinar and the platform that's been put together, and get a real jump start on succeeding in this project.
Frank?
Yeah, I'll just jump on what Wade said. Absolutely, this is a very large problem, and I'd like to give kudos to you, Matt, and Uber, the rest of the folks at Uber Ether, for building this platform. This is something that is, there is nothing that compares to it, and the simplification, the security, the governance of it, and your smart team. I mean, kudos, man. I love it.
Well, thank you, Frank. As you know, I just get to be the pretty face. I got a bunch of smart and pretty faces around me, but we were very lucky to have the team we have, and yeah, I appreciate the hell out of them and all of you. But Brian, before we sign off today, the last word.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is understanding downstream effects of whatever you're investing in. And it may not be apparent to you in the beginning, but try to think through of what that means long term. I wanted to make some type of reference like where it's very similar to where you stare at the sun during a partial eclipse. You don't go blind right away, but about 3 days later, when the sunburn actually sets in on the retina. But no, in all reality, when we look at this, we understand there's a lot of buzz around AI, a lot of buzz around cloud. But understand what that means and what it doesn't mean too. Understand you're going to have a mix of investments of AI, of cloud, but also of on-prem, also of legacy systems we can't update. I always give an example. We can't update the systems that are used to communicate with the Voyager spacecraft. Not possible. Still a mission that's ongoing. So being able to try to pick solutions that can be used across multiple different platforms without having to retrain the limited amount of human resources we have for effectiveness, I think is very, very critical for any organization so that, I don't know, I wanted to say smooth sailing. That's the problem. I'm in National Harbor this week, so I've seen too many boats. And always thank you and thanks to everyone else for, having me on this panel.
All right. Well, with that, I want to thank the panelists as well as all of our guests today, and Karasoff for hosting us. Caitlin, I will throw it back to you to close us out if that's okay.